Mercer Cutter stood on the boardwalk outside the Blue Prairie Gazette with his hat in his hands and 3 years of silence between them. Mirabelle Everly gripped the doorframe hard enough to splinter wood, because the man who destroyed her was back, and Blue Prairie was dying of thirst. He looked older, harder. The short beard was new, and so was the scar along his left temple. But those steady eyes hadn't changed. The ones that used to watch her like she was the only true thing in a crooked world. Now those eyes held secrets. "You shouldn't be here," Mirabelle said. Her voice came out steady, which felt like a miracle, because her heart was hammering against her ribs. "The corporation sent you." The words tasted like ash. Mercer worked for High Plains Freight and Holdings now. The same corporation strangling her town. The same one trying to steal the water rights that kept Blue Prairie alive. He took one step closer. "I came because you wrote to the territorial governor. Because you're fighting them in court. Because you're going to get yourself killed, Mirabelle." She laughed, sharp and cold. "You don't get to care anymore. You left. You chose them over this town. Over me." Mercer's jaw tightened. "I chose to keep you breathing. You never understood that." Behind him, 2 riders reined up at the hitching post. Corporation men, by the look of their matched coats and the rifles slung across their saddles. One of them caught Mercer's eye and nodded. Mirabelle's stomach went cold. "Get off my property," she said quietly, "and tell your friends that Blue Prairie won't roll over. We have a hearing in 3 days. Judge Holloway is coming from the territorial capital. We have rights. Legal rights." Mercer stepped back, but his gaze didn't leave hers. "The hearing won't matter if you're dead before the judge arrives." He turned and walked toward the corporation riders, his shoulders tight, and Mirabelle slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. Inside the small newspaper office, her assistant Clara looked up from the typesetting table, eyes wide. "That was him? The one you were going to marry?" Mirabelle crossed to the desk and picked up the latest edition. Front page headline read "Water Rights Hearing Set. Hope Rising for Blue Prairie." She'd written every word herself, interviewed every rancher and shopkeeper, built a case on paper that the town's claim to the river predated the corporation's by 15 years. 3 days until Judge Holloway heard the arguments. 3 days to save the town. And Mercer Cutter was here to stop her. She forced herself to breathe. "Print 50 more copies," she told Clara. "Distribute them to every ranch within riding distance. I want every voter, every landowner, every citizen who cares about this town to show up at that hearing." Clara hesitated. "Miss Everly, those riders, they're not just watching. People are saying the corporation is offering money, a lot of money, to anyone who testifies against the town's claim." Mirabelle's hands curled into fists. "Then we find people who won't be bought." The door opened again. Mirabelle spun, expecting Mercer, but it was Samuel Gray, the mayor, his face pale under his hat brim. "We've got a problem. Dust storm coming. Big one. Weather station in Ridge Creek sent a wire. It'll hit tomorrow night, maybe the night after. Could last 2 days." Mirabelle's mind raced. The hearing is in 3 days. If the storm delays the judge, if he can't make it through, the corporation wins by default, Samuel finished grimly. The deadline's fixed. If we don't present our case on the 23rd, we lose the water rights forever. The river gets diverted to their rail line. Blue Prairie dries up. She looked out the window. Mercer was still talking to the corporation riders. One of them gestured toward the newspaper office. Her newspaper office. "Can we move the hearing up?" she asked. "Get word to the judge tonight?" Samuel shook his head. "He's traveling by stage. Won't reach Blue Prairie until the morning of the 23rd. If the storm closes the road, he won't make it at all. And there's no provision for rescheduling." The territorial legislature wrote the deadline into the water compact. Miss it, and the claim reverts to the corporation. Mirabelle stared at the headline she'd written with such hope 6 hours ago. "How fast can we get a message to the judge's route?" "Fastest rider could intercept him at Crow's Junction by dawn," Samuel said. "Warn him about the storm. Maybe convince him to push through tonight." "I'll ride," Mirabelle said. Samuel's eyes widened. "You can't. It's 40 miles through open prairie in winter, and those corporation men are watching every move you make. They'll follow you. Then I'll lose them." She crossed to the desk and pulled out a satchel, started loading it with documents. Depositions, survey maps, the original town charter. Everything Judge Holloway would need to rule in their favor, even if the storm kept him from reaching Blue Prairie. "I'll ride to Crow's Junction, intercept the judge, and make the case on the road if I have to." "Miss Everly," Clara said quietly, "they'll stop you. Those men. They have guns." Mirabelle met her gaze. "So do I." She opened the bottom desk drawer and lifted out a small revolver, the one her father had taught her to shoot when she was 16, before he died and left her the newspaper. Before Mercer left and taught her that love was just another thing people walked away from when the price got too high. Samuel looked ill. "If you're caught carrying court documents out of town, they could claim you're fleeing jurisdiction. Destroy your credibility." "Only if I'm caught." Mirabelle buckled the satchel. "I leave in an hour. After dark. Tell no one." The mayor left, shaking his head. Clara sat type in silence, her hands trembling slightly. Mirabelle checked the revolver, checked the maps, tried not to think about the fact that Mercer was still outside. Still watching, still working for the people who wanted her town dead. 3 years ago, he'd promised her forever. He'd kissed her in the schoolhouse garden under a sky full of stars and told her he'd build her a life worth living. 2 weeks later, his younger brother shot a man in a card game gone wrong, and the territorial marshal came looking. Mercer disappeared the same night. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. She heard later that he'd taken a job with High Plains Freight, that he'd moved to Cheyenne, that he'd become the kind of man who solved problems for powerful people, the kind of problems that didn't get discussed in polite company. Now he was here, and she didn't know if he'd come to save her or bury her. The sun dropped below the horizon. Mirabelle changed into riding clothes, dark trousers, and a heavy coat, pinned her hair tighter. She waited until full dark, until the street outside emptied, until even the saloon noise faded to a murmur. Then she slipped out the back door. Her horse, a sturdy mare named Pepper, waited in the small stable behind the newspaper office. Mirabelle saddled her quickly, hands steady despite the hammering in her chest. She tied the satchel to the saddle horn, checked the revolver one more time, and led Pepper into the alley. The night was cold and clear, no moon yet. Stars scattered across the black sky like thrown salt. Mirabelle mounted and turned Pepper toward the north road, the one that led to Crow's Junction. She made it 3 blocks before a rider stepped out of the shadows ahead. Mercer. He sat easy in the saddle, his horse blocking the road, his face unreadable in the starlight. Going somewhere? Mirabel's hand drifted toward the revolver. Out of my way. You're riding to intercept the judge. He said it like a fact, not a question. You're going to try to get him through before the storm hits. He shook his head slowly. It won't work, Mirabel. The corporation knows. They've got men on every road. You won't make it 5 miles. Her throat tightened. Then I'll die trying. This town is worth dying for. Mercer's horse shifted, restless. Is it worth killing for? She didn't answer. The question sat between them like a live coal. He dismounted, moved toward her with that same careful grace he'd always had, like a man who expected trouble and was ready for it. Listen to me. The corporation doesn't want a legal fight. They want you gone. They've been buying testimony, yes. But they've also been making threats. 3 ranchers who plan to testify for the town have pulled out in the last week. One of them left Blue Prairie entirely. Sold his land for pennies and ran. Mirabel's jaw tightened. I know. I've been documenting it. Witness intimidation. It'll strengthen our case. Mercer stopped 5 feet away. Not if you're dead. They sent me here to make sure you don't reach the judge. To make sure this hearing never happens. The words landed like a punch. Mirabel's hand closed on the revolver grip. And are you going to stop me? Mercer's face changed. Something raw flickered across it. No. I'm going to help you. But we do it my way. Or we both end up dead. She searched his face for the lie, for the betrayal she knew was coming. Why would you help me? You work for them. You chose them. His voice went rough. I chose to keep my brother out of a noose. The marshal had him dead to rights. Murder charge. The corporation offered a deal. They made the charges disappear. In exchange, I work for them. I do what they tell me. I go where they send me. And I've spent 3 years hating myself for it. Mirabel's breath caught. Your brother, where is he now? Mercer looked away. Cattle ranch in Montana. New name. Clean slate. He doesn't even know what I gave up to buy him that. The anger in her chest twisted into something more complicated. You could have told me. You could have trusted me. And put you in the line of fire? He shook his head. The corporation doesn't forgive, Mirabel. They don't forget. If I'd told you the truth, if I'd stayed, they would have used you to control me. Or worse. So I left. I made you hate me. I made sure you'd move on. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to pull him close. Did it work? Are you free of them now? No. His voice was flat. I'll never be free. But I can still choose what I do with the leash they've got on me. And I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Blue Prairie. Even if it costs me everything. Mirabel's mind raced. The storm. The hearing. The corporation men watching every road. If you're helping me, what's your plan? We don't run to the judge, Mercer said. We bring the judge to us. There's a line shack at High Wind Ranch, 8 miles north. Weatherproof. Stocked. If the storm hits, that's where the judge will need to shelter. We ride there now, set up, and make sure he finds it. Then we hold that shack until the storm clears and we can get him to town. She frowned. High Wind Ranch is corporation land now. They bought it last year. Exactly. They won't expect us to hide right under their noses. And the shack is solid. It'll hold against the storm. He paused. But we need to move now. The corporation men will realize you're gone within the hour. They'll come looking. Mirabelle weighed the options. 40 miles to Crow's Junction through open country with armed men hunting her. Or 8 miles to a defensible position with a man she didn't trust, but desperately wanted to. Trust is a decision you make when the bullet's already in the air, her father used to say. You either choose it or you don't. Hesitation just gets you killed. She released the revolver. All right. We go to High Wind. But if you're lying to me, Mercer, if this is a trap, I will put a bullet in you myself. He smiled, sad and tired. If I'm lying, I'll hand you the gun. They rode north into the winter dark, side by side, the prairie stretching cold and empty around them. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and distance. Mirabelle kept one hand near her revolver, her eyes on Mercer's silhouette. He rode like a man who'd spent years in the saddle, easy and alert, scanning the horizon. After an hour, he spoke. I heard about your editorials, the ones calling out the land grabs, the water theft. You've made powerful enemies, Mirabelle. She kept her gaze forward. Someone has to tell the truth. That's what a newspaper does. It's also what gets newspaper editors killed. He glanced at her. You're braver than I ever was. No, I'm just more stubborn. She paused. And I don't have a brother to protect. I only have a town. And a principle. Water rights aren't just legal theory. They're survival. If the corporation diverts that river, Blue Prairie dies. Every family, every farm, every future. Mercer nodded slowly. I know. I've read the contracts. The corporation wants the water for the new rail line. They're building east from Cheyenne. They need reliable water for steam engines, for livestock transport, for town development along the route. Blue Prairie is in the way, so they're squeezing you out. And you help them do it, Mirabelle said quietly. Yes. His voice was raw. I surveyed the land. I mapped the river. I delivered the documents that let them file the competing claim. I did all of it. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. The honesty of it hit her harder than anger would have. She looked at him, really looked, and saw exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. This isn't redemption, she said. Helping me now doesn't erase what you did. I know. But it's a start. They rode in silence for another mile. The prairie opened wide and dark, the stars blazing cold overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, thin and lonely. Mirabelle's mind kept circling back to the same question. If the corporation sent you to stop me, why aren't they worried you'll betray them? They are worried, Mercer said. That's why they sent 2 other men with me. The ones you saw this afternoon. They're insurance. If I don't report back by dawn, they'll know I've turned. And they'll come after both of us. Her stomach dropped. So we're not just racing the storm. We're racing your leash. He nodded. Which is why we need to move fast. Get to the shack. Secure it. Find the judge and convince him to shelter there. Then hold out until the storm passes, and we can get him to Blue Prairie for the hearing. And if the corporation men find us first, then we fight. His voice was calm, matter of fact. I've got a rifle. You've got that revolver. The shack has good sightlines. We can hold it for a while. How long is a while? Long enough. I hope. They reached High Wind Ranch just after midnight. The main ranch house stood dark and abandoned, windows boarded over. The corporation had gutted it after the purchase, fired the hands, sold off the livestock. Now it was just empty buildings and ghosts. The line shack sat a quarter-mile east, a small, sturdy structure built into the side of a low rise. Stone foundation, thick timber walls, a roof that sloped steep to shed snow. One door, two narrow windows, a small corral out back. Mercer dismounted and checked the door. Locked. He pulled a key from his coat pocket. Mirabel raised an eyebrow. You just happen to have a key? I helped survey this property, remember? I know every building, every lock. He opened the door and stepped inside, striking a match. The interior flickered into view. A single room, maybe 12 feet square. Iron stove in the corner, two bunks built into the walls, a rough table, shelves stocked with canned goods, lamp oil, firewood. Mirabel led the horses to the corral and unsaddled them quickly. The wind was rising, colder now, with a strange metallic taste. The storm was coming. Inside, Mercer got the stove going. The warmth spread slowly, pushing back the cold. Mirabel set her satchel on the table and checked the documents. Everything was still dry, still intact. Survey maps showing the town's original water claim. Depositions from the founders' descendants. The town charter, signed and sealed in 1868. 5 years before the corporation even existed. This is solid evidence, she said. If we can get it in front of Judge Holloway, we win. If. Mercer poured water from a canteen into a battered pot and set it on the stove. The judge was scheduled to overnight in Ridge Creek. That's 15 miles south. If the storm hits before he leaves, he might not even try for Blue Prairie. Then we ride to Ridge Creek and bring him here. In a dust storm? Mercer shook his head. Visibility drops to nothing. You can't see 10 feet. Riders get lost and die of exposure 100 yards from shelter. We'd never make it. Mirabel crossed to the window. The stars were dimming now, a haze creeping across the sky. So we wait. We hope he's smart enough to head north before the storm closes in. And we pray he finds this shack. Or we send up a signal, Mercer said slowly. Light, sound, something to guide him here. She turned. A signal would also guide the corporation men. Yes. He met her eyes. But if we don't risk it, the judge rides blind, and we lose everything anyway. The weight of the choice settled on her shoulders. She thought about Blue Prairie, about Clara and Samuel and every family counting on her, about the children who'd grow up in a dead town if she failed, about the truth she'd printed in the Gazette, the promise she'd made to fight until the end. We send the signal, she said, at first light. That gives us a few hours to prepare, to fortify this place. If the corporation comes, we hold them off. Mercer nodded. There's a flagpole out back. We can rig something visible. And I've got flares in my saddlebag. Railroad issue. They burn bright. They burn bright. They spent the next 2 hours working in tense silence. Mercer checked the rifle, cleaned it, loaded it, set extra ammunition on the table. Mirabelle reinforced the door with a timber brace, checked the windows for sightlines, made sure the stove had enough fuel to last days if necessary. Around 2 in the morning, exhaustion caught up with her. She sat on one of the bunks, her back against the cold wall, and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, Mercer was sitting across from her, watching. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch." She shook her head. "I don't trust you enough to sleep." "Fair." He leaned back, his face half in shadow. "For what it's worth, I never stopped thinking about you. Every job I did for the corporation, every town I helped them devour, I thought about you. About what you'd say if you knew. About how much you'd hate me. I do hate you." The words came out softer than she intended. "You broke my heart. You made me believe in something, and then you destroyed it." "I know." Mirabelle's throat tightened. "The worst part is that I understand why you did it. If someone I loved was in danger, I'd do terrible things to save them too. But understanding doesn't fix the fact that you didn't trust me enough to let me help. You decided I was too weak, too fragile, too much of a liability, and you cut me out." Mercer's jaw worked. "You're right. I didn't trust you. Not because you were weak, but because I was. I couldn't stand the thought of you being hurt because of me, because of my family's mess. So I made the choice for both of us, and I've regretted it every day since." She looked at him, this man who'd been her whole future once, and felt the old longing rise up sharp and cruel. "Do you even know what you want now? Or are you still just reacting? Still just trying to fix things by running away?" "I want you safe," he said roughly. "I want Blue Prairie to survive. I want to stop working for people I despise. And I want—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I want one more chance to prove I can be the man you deserved 3 years ago." Mirabelle's heart twisted. Proving it means staying. It means fighting even when it's hard. Even when people you love are in danger. You don't get to keep choosing the easy coward's way out and call it protection. "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "That's why I'm here. That's why I'm choosing this. Even if it kills me." The wind outside rose to a howl. The shack creaked. Dust began to hiss against the windows. The storm was here. Mercer crossed to the window and looked out. The world beyond the glass was turning gray and formless, the stars disappearing behind a wall of churning dust. "We've got maybe an hour before it's full strength. If the judge left Ridge Creek at dawn, he could be close. We need to get that signal up now." They worked fast, stumbling through the rising wind. Mercer rigged a bright red cloth to the flagpole and raised it high. The fabric snapped and roared, barely visible through the thickening dust. He set 3 flares in a triangle pattern around the shack, ready to light. By the time they got back inside, the storm was a solid roaring wall. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world outside the windows was brown chaos, dust blasting against the walls, the wind screaming. Mirabelle checked her revolver for the 10th time. If the judge is out there, he'll see the flag. He'll come. If he doesn't get lost first, Mercer said grimly. Or if the corporation men don't reach him first. They waited. Minutes crawled. The storm raged. The shack held, solid and stubborn. But the noise was relentless. A grinding roar that made thinking hard. Then, through the storm, a sound. Hoofbeats. Mercer grabbed the rifle, Mirabelle moved to the window. Through the swirling dust, shapes emerged. 2 riders, hunched low against the wind. One of them wore a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. The other was slumped in the saddle, barely holding on. "That's the judge," Mercer said, his voice tight. "And that's his clerk." They made it. He threw open the door and fired a flare. Brilliant red light exploded, cutting through the dust. The riders turned toward it, urged their horses forward. Mercer ran out into the storm, Mirabelle right behind him. The wind hit like a fist, dust stinging her eyes, filling her mouth. She could barely see Mercer, barely see the riders. Then hands reached down, and she was helping an older man dismount, half carrying him toward the shack. The clerk stumbled after them, coughing. Mercer led the horses to the corral, moving fast. Inside, Mirabelle slammed the door. The judge collapsed onto a bunk, his face gray with exhaustion. The clerk, a thin young man with spectacles, leaned against the wall and coughed dust. "Judge Holloway," Mirabelle said, her voice shaking. "I'm Mirabelle Everly, editor of the Blue Prairie Gazette. I need to present evidence for the water rights hearing." The judge looked at her, his eyes sharp despite his exhaustion. "The hearing is in 2 days, Miss Everly. This is highly irregular." "The storm will last at least that long," Mirabelle said. "Maybe longer. If we wait, we'll miss the deadline. The town's claim will be forfeit. Please, I have everything you need right here." She crossed to the table and pulled out the satchel. Maps, depositions, the original charter. It's all documented. Blue Prairie has priority rights. The corporation's claim is fraudulent. Judge Holloway looked at Mercer, who stood by the door, rifle in hand. "And who are you?" Mercer cut her. "I work for High Plains Freight and Holdings. Or I did. Until tonight." The judge's eyebrows rose. "You're testifying against your own employer?" Mercer's voice was steady. "I'm testifying for the truth. The corporation manipulated land records. They bribed surveyors. They intimidated witnesses. I helped them do it. And I'm here to make it right." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned forward. "Show me." Mirabelle spread the documents on the table. The maps showed the river's course, the original survey markers, the town boundaries established in 1868. The depositions told the story of Blue Prairie's founding, of families who'd built their lives around that water, who'd filed legal claims years before the corporation existed. Mercer added his testimony. He described the falsified surveys, the backdated contracts, the shell companies the corporation had used to obscure their claim. He named names. He provided dates. He burned every bridge he had left. The judge listened, his face unreadable. His clerk took notes, his hand cramping, but steady. Outside, the storm howled. And then, through the roar, another sound. Gunfire. Mercer spun toward the window. "They're here." Mirabelle's blood went cold. The corporation men. They followed the signal. "How many?" the judge asked, his voice calm. Mercer peered through the swirling dust. "Hard to say. At least 3. Maybe more." The clerk went pale. "What do they want?" "To stop this hearing," Mirabelle said. "To make sure the evidence never reaches court." She looked at the judge. "You need to see all of this. You need to rule." "I can't rule under duress, Miss Everly." Judge Holloway's voice was firm. "If we're under attack, Any decision I make could be challenged as coerced. Then we hold them off, Mercer said. We wait out the storm. We get you to Blue Prairie alive. And you rule there, in open court, where everyone can see. Another shot cracked. Closer. A bullet punched through the window, shattering glass. The clerk yelped and dove for cover. Mercer returned fire. The rifles cracked sharp and violent in the enclosed space. Get away from the windows, he shouted. All of you. Mirabelle grabbed the satchel, shoved it under the bunk. She pulled out her revolver, checked the cylinder. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. She'd written the truth. She'd fought for it. Now she'd defend it. The judge and his clerk huddled in the corner. Mercer moved to the other window, rifle ready. Mirabelle took position by the door. Outside, voices shouted through the storm. Cutter, we know you're in there. Send out the woman and the documents. You can still walk away from this. Mercer's voice was cold and hard. No deal. You're a dead man, Cutter. The corporation doesn't forgive traitors. Then I'll die clean. Mercer fired twice, quick and precise. Someone outside cursed. Footsteps scrambled. Mirabelle's heart pounded. She counted breaths, counted seconds. The storm was their ally and their enemy. It hid the attackers, but it also trapped them all in this tiny box of stone and timber. A shape moved past the window. She fired. The shape jerked and fell. Mercer glanced at her. Something like pride in his eyes. Nice shot. My father taught me. She reloaded, hands shaking now but still functional. He said a woman on the frontier needed 3 things: a good horse, a clear head, and the will to pull the trigger. He taught you well. Another volley of shots. The door shuddered under impact. Mirabelle braced the timber brace tighter. How long can we hold? Long enough, Mercer said. The storm will break eventually. And they can't afford a siege. Too many witnesses. If the judge survives, if he testifies that the corporation tried to kill him, they're finished. So they'll rush us, Mirabelle said. All at once. Soon, probably. Mercer checked his ammunition. I've got maybe 20 rounds left. You? 8. The judge spoke from the corner. If it comes to surrender, I want you both to know I've seen the evidence. I've heard the testimony. If I survive this, Blue Prairie gets its water rights. You have my word. Mirabelle's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, the judge said dryly. We still have to live through the next hour. The attack came 5 minutes later. 4 men rushed the shack from different angles, firing as they came. Mercer took down 2. Mirabelle winged a 3rd. The 4th reached the door, slammed into it. The timber brace cracked. Mercer spun, fired point blank through the door. A scream. The impact stopped. Silence. Except for the storm. Mirabelle's ears rang. Her hands were numb. She reloaded by feel, her eyes on the broken window. They're pulling back, Mercer said. Regrouping, or waiting for reinforcements. Mirabelle checked the door. The brace was cracked, but holding. We can't take another assault like that. Mercer met her eyes. If they rush again, take the judge and his clerk out the back window. Get them to the horses. Ride for Blue Prairie. And you? I'll hold the door. Buy you time. No. Her voice was sharp. We don't split up. We hold together, or we fall together. Mirabelle, if you die here, the town loses. The evidence doesn't matter if no one's alive to present it. She crossed to him, grabbed his coat. Listen to me. You don't get to play hero and die noble. You don't get to make that choice for me again. We're in this together. We fight together. Understand? His face changed. The walls he'd built, the careful control, cracked. I can't lose you again. Then don't. She held his gaze. Stay alive. Fight smart. And trust me to do the same. For a moment, the storm and the danger and the fear fell away. There was just the two of them, inches apart, breathing hard, and the thing between them that had never quite died. Mercer's hand came up, cupped her face, rough and gentle. I never stopped loving you. I know, Mirabelle whispered. I never stopped hating you for leaving. And I never stopped loving you either. And I hate that too. He kissed her. Hard and desperate, and full of 3 years of longing and regret. She kissed him back, her free hand fisting in his coat. The revolver still gripped tight in the other. The door shook. A voice outside shouted. Last chance, Cutter. Surrender or burn. Mercer broke the kiss, his forehead against hers. They're going to set fire to the shack. Mirabelle's mind raced. The storm, the wind. Fire won't catch in this dust. It'll choke out, unless they use enough accelerant. Lamp oil. Whiskey. Mercer's voice was grim. They've got time. And they're desperate. And they're desperate. Then we go now. Out the back. All of us. She turned to the judge. Can you ride? Judge Holloway stood. His face set. I didn't survive 3 decades on the bench to die in a line shack. Let's move. They worked fast. Mercer covered the front, while Mirabelle helped the judge and his clerk out the back window. The corral was a chaos of dust and wind. The horses spooked, but still there. She got the judge mounted, got the clerk up behind him. Mercer fired 3 more shots, then vaulted through the window. Mirabelle was already on Pepper. Mercer swung onto his horse. Ride north, he shouted over the storm. There's a ravine half a mile out. We can lose them there. They rode hard into the brown maelstrom, the world a nightmare of dust and wind and 0 visibility. Mirabelle stayed close to Mercer's silhouette, trusting him to know the land. Behind them, shouts. More gunfire, wild and unfocused. The ravine opened up sudden and steep. Mercer led them down a narrow trail, the horses scrambling. At the bottom, a dry creek bed, sheltered from the worst of the wind. They dismounted, gasping. The judge sagged against his horse. The clerk looked ready to faint. Mercer checked their back trail. I don't think they followed. Storm's too thick. They'll wait it out. Then track us. How long until the storm breaks? Mirabelle asked. Could be hours. Could be a day. He looked at the sky. What little of it was visible. But the worst is passing. The wind's shifting. She pulled out the satchel, checked the documents. Still intact. Still dry. We need to get to Blue Prairie. The hearing is tomorrow. The judge coughed, spat dust. If we can reach town by dawn, I'll convene court immediately. Emergency session. We'll hear the case, and I'll rule before the deadline. Mirabelle looked at Mercer. Can we make it? If we ride through the night? Yes, it's 15 miles. The storm will slow us, but it'll also cover our tracks. He paused. But I need to tell you something. The corporation men, they're not the only danger. There's a man named Voss. He's the company enforcer. He's been tracking me since I left Cheyenne. If he's in Blue Prairie, if he figures out I've turned, he'll come for me. And he won't stop. Then we deal with him when we have to, Mirabelle said. Right now, we focus on the judge, on the hearing, on saving the town. Mercer nodded. Let's ride. They climbed out of the ravine and pushed south through the dying storm. The dust was still thick, the wind still brutal, but the worst had passed. Visibility crept up to 20 feet, then 50. Hours blurred together. The horses labored. The riders hunched low, faces wrapped against the grit. Mirabelle's body ached. Her eyes burned, but she kept moving. Beside her, Mercer rode silent and watchful, the rifle across his saddle. The judge and his clerk stayed close, grim and determined. Dawn came slow and gray. The storm finally broke, the wind dropping to a whisper. The world emerged pale and scoured. The prairie stretched out like hammered metal under a white sky. And ahead, on the horizon, the rooftops of Blue Prairie. We made it, Mirabelle whispered. Not yet, Mercer said. Look, at the edge of town, riders, 6 of them, waiting, corporation men. And in the center, a tall figure in a black coat. Even at a distance, Mirabelle could feel the weight of his presence. Voss, Mercer said quietly. He's here. The judge straightened in his saddle. I'm an officer of the territorial court. They can't stop me from entering that town. They can try, Mercer said. And they will. Mirabelle's hand went to her revolver. Then we ride through them. 6 armed men against 4 exhausted riders, 2 of whom aren't fighters. Mercer shook his head. We need another way. There is no other way. Mirabelle's voice was hard. That town is dying. Those people are counting on us. We have the evidence. We have the judge. We ride in, we convene court, and we win. Or we die trying. Mercer looked at her, and she saw the decision forming behind his eyes. All right, but we do it smart. He turned to the judge. You and your clerk stay behind us. When we hit their line, you break left and ride straight for the church. That's where we'll hold the hearing. The whole town will be there. Voss won't risk a public massacre. And you two? The judge asked. We'll keep Voss busy. Mercer checked his rifle. One way or another. They rode forward at a steady walk. The 6 riders didn't move, just waited. A silent wall. Voss sat his horse like a monument, tall and lean, with a face like carved granite and eyes that missed nothing. When they were 50 feet out, he raised a hand. The other riders drew their guns. Mercer cut her. Voss called. His voice was smooth and cold. You've made a serious mistake. The corporation is willing to overlook your recent lapse in judgment. Return the documents. Send the woman and the judge back to where they came from. And we'll forget this ever happened. Mercer reined up. No. Voss's expression didn't change. Then you're a dead man. and so is everyone with you. Maybe, Mercer said. But the judge has already seen the evidence. He's already heard the testimony. You kill him, and the territorial governor will send marshals. Federal marshals. The kind who don't take bribes. The kind who hang men like you. Voss smiled, thin and humorless. Accidents happen. Dust storms are dangerous. Tragic. Really, when a judge and his clerk get lost and die of exposure. Except we're not lost, Judge Holloway said, his voice ringing clear. I am here, in full possession of my faculties and my authority. I am ordering you to stand aside. Interfering with a territorial judge in the performance of his duties is a federal crime. Voss's smile widened. I don't see a courtroom, Your Honor. I don't see a town. I see empty prairie and a dust storm that just killed 4 people. You see witnesses, Mirabel said. She pointed. Behind Voss and his men, the edges of Blue Prairie were coming alive. People stepping out onto porches, gathering in the street. Samuel Gray, the mayor, standing on the steps of the church. Clara, her assistant, clutching a notebook. Families. Shopkeepers. Ranchers who'd ridden in for the hearing. The whole town. Watching. Voss turned, saw the crowd, and his face went hard. You wanted a show, Mirabel said. Here it is. Every person in Blue Prairie is watching you right now. You fire a shot, you'll have 100 witnesses. Federal witnesses. Are you willing to kill a whole town to protect the corporation's lie? Voss's hand drifted toward his gun. Mercer raised the rifle, aimed it dead center at Voss's chest. Don't. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Voss lowered his hand. He looked at Mercer, and something dark and final passed between them. This isn't over, Cutter. You've made an enemy you can't afford. I've had that enemy for 3 years, Mercer said quietly. At least now I'm fighting back. Voss jerked his horse's reins and rode past them, his men following. They didn't leave, just repositioned at the edge of town, watching. Mirabel let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The judge urged his horse forward. The crowd parted, silent and tense. He rode straight to the church, dismounted with his clerk's help, and climbed the steps. Court is now in session, he announced, his voice carrying. All parties to the Blue Prairie water rights dispute step forward. The hearing took 2 hours. Inside the church, packed with every citizen who could fit, Judge Holloway examined the documents. He questioned Mirabel. He questioned Mercer. He called forward 3 ranchers who testified about the town's water use dating back to the founding. The corporation's lawyer, a slick man from Cheyenne, tried to argue procedural grounds, tried to claim the emergency session was invalid. Judge Holloway shut him down. This court has jurisdiction. The deadline is today. I will rule today. Sit down. Outside, Voss and his men waited. Inside, Mirabel stood before the judge and laid out the case. The maps, the surveys, the town charter. Mercer stood beside her and confessed everything. The falsified records, the bribes, the intimidation. The corporation lawyer's face went white. When the testimony ended, Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair. He looked at the packed church, at the faces watching him, and spoke. The law is clear. Priority water rights belong to the first established claim. Blue Prairie filed its claim in 1868, supported by settlement development, and continuous use. The corporation's claim, filed in 1883, is not only secondary, but fraudulent. Based on the evidence presented, and the testimony of Mr. Mercer Cutter, a witness with direct knowledge of the corporation's malfeasance, I rule in favor of Blue Prairie. The town retains full water rights to the disputed river section. The corporation's claim is denied and nullified. The church erupted. Cheers, shouts, tears. People embraced. Samuel Gray grabbed Mirabelle's hand and shook it so hard she thought her arm would come off. Mercer stood apart, his face unreadable. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am recommending a territorial investigation into High Plains Freight and Holdings for fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of legal water rights. Warrants will be issued. The corporation lawyer bolted for the door. Outside, Voss and his men were already riding away, fast. Mirabelle pushed through the crowd and found Mercer on the church steps, staring after the departing riders. "You did it," she said. "You saved the town." He shook his head. "You saved the town. I just stopped being a coward long enough to help." She touched his arm. "What happens now? To you?" Mercer's smile was bitter. "The corporation will come after me. Voss won't stop. I'll be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Then don't look alone." Mirabelle's voice was steady. "Stay. Fight. Build something here that's worth protecting." He turned to her, and the longing in his face was raw and unguarded. "You'd forgive me? After everything?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm willing to try, if you're willing to stay. To prove that you're not the man who runs when things get hard." "I'm not that man anymore." Mercer's hand found hers. "I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise the corporation won't retaliate. But I can promise I'll fight. For this town. For you. For the life we should have had." Mirabelle looked at their joined hands, at the calluses and scars, the dirt and dust. "Then let's start building it." The crowd spilled out of the church, still celebrating. Clara hugged Mirabelle, tears streaming. Samuel clapped Mercer on the back. The ranchers bought rounds at the saloon. The whole town felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. As the sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the storm haze, Mirabelle stood with Mercer on the edge of the crowd and let herself believe. Not in easy redemption, not in fairy tale endings, but in the hard, messy work of rebuilding trust. In second chances, earned through action. In love that survived the worst and came back stronger. 3 days later, Mirabelle printed a special edition of the Gazette. Front page headline, "Blue Prairie Wins." Water rights secured. Below it, a smaller story, local man testifies against former employer, exposes fraud. She didn't name Mercer in the article. She didn't have to. The whole town knew. That night, he came to the newspaper office after dark. She was alone, setting type for the next edition. He stood in the doorway, hat in hands, just like that first day. "I'm leaving." Her heart stopped. "Where?" "Cheyenne. The territorial marshal wants my full testimony. It'll take weeks, maybe months. There are other towns the corporation targeted, other frauds to expose." He paused. "I'll be a witness in a dozen trials. I'll have a target on my back the whole time." Mirabelle set down the type, her hands shaking. "So you're running again?" No. His voice was firm. I'm fighting. I'm finishing what I started. And when it's done, when the corporation is buried and the warrants are served and the trials are over, I'm coming back. To Blue Prairie. To you. If you'll have me. She crossed to him slowly. How do I know you'll come back? How do I know this isn't just another goodbye? Mercer reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to her. It was a deed. To High Wind Ranch. Signed over to Mirabelle Everly. I bought it back from the corporation, he said quietly. With every cent I had saved. It's yours now. The land. The house. The future. I'm coming back because that's where I belong. With you. Building something real. Mirabelle's eyes burned. This doesn't fix everything. I know. But it's a start. He stepped closer. I love you, Mirabelle. I loved you 3 years ago. And I love you now. And I'll love you when I ride back into this town and ask you to marry me proper. In a church. In front of everyone. No more secrets. No more running. She looked at the deed, at the man who'd broken her heart and was now trying to rebuild it piece by piece. You're asking me to wait. I'm asking you to trust me. One more time. Mirabelle folded the deed carefully and set it on the desk. Then she stepped into his arms and kissed him. Not desperate this time. Not frantic. Just steady and sure and full of the kind of love that survives storms. Come back, she whispered against his mouth. Don't make me hunt you down. He smiled. And it was real. I'll come back. I promise. Mercer left at dawn. Mirabelle stood on the boardwalk and watched him ride out. And this time, she believed him. The weeks crawled past. She ran the newspaper. She visited High Wind Ranch and started making plans. Clara helped her sketch out repairs, new fences, a rebuilt barn. The town pitched in, grateful and eager to see the land restored. Letters arrived from Cheyenne. Short, factual updates. Mercer's testimony was damning. The corporation was collapsing. Executives were fleeing. Warrants were being served. And then, on a cold morning in early spring, a rider came up the road. Mirabelle was at the ranch, overseeing the fence work, when she saw him. Dark brown hair, steady eyes, the same dangerous face, but softer now. Open. Mercer reined up 20 feet away and dismounted. He didn't speak. Just stood there, waiting. Mirabelle set down the hammer she'd been holding and walked toward him. You came back. I promised. The trials? Done. The corporation's finished. Voss is in federal custody. The other men scattered. He paused. I'm free, Mirabelle. For the first time in 3 years, I don't owe anyone. I don't answer to anyone. I'm just me. She stopped 5 feet away, studying him. And what do you want, Mercer cut her? You. This town. A future that doesn't involve running or hiding or making deals with devils. He stepped closer. I want to rebuild this ranch with you. I want to raise horses and print newspapers and fight with you over fence placement and editorial tone. I want Sunday dinners and hard work and a life that's ours. Mirabelle's heart was full and aching. You're sure? No more ghosts? No more debts? No more ghosts. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside, a simple gold band. I bought this in Cheyenne. I've been carrying it for a month, waiting for the right moment. He dropped to one knee in the cold spring mud. Mirabelle Everly, will you marry me? Will you trust me to build the life I should have fought for 3 years ago? She looked at him. This man who'd broken her heart and then put it back together piece by painful piece. Who'd chosen her over safety, over survival, over everything. Yes, she said. But if you ever run again, I'm keeping the ranch and you're sleeping in the barn. He laughed, bright and real, and slid the ring onto her finger. Then he stood and pulled her close and kissed her in front of the whole work crew, who cheered and whistled. The wedding happened 2 weeks later in the Blue Prairie Church, the same place Judge Holloway had ruled in their favor. The whole town came. Clara stood as Mirabelle's witness. Samuel walked her down the aisle. Mercer waited at the front, clean-shaven now, in a new suit. And when Mirabelle reached him, he took her hands and spoke the vows like they were a promise he'd die to keep. The judge himself officiated, grinning. By the power vested in me by the territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mercer kissed her, and the church erupted again, just like it had at the hearing. Joy and relief and hope all tangled together. Outside, the spring sky was clear and blue. The river ran strong, fed by snowmelt, sparkling in the sun. Mirabelle and Mercer walked down the church steps together, hand in hand, into the noise and laughter of the celebration. Someone asked what they'd do now. Mercer looked at Mirabelle. We build. The ranch came back to life slowly. Fences mended. Barns raised. Horses bought and trained. Mercer worked from dawn to dusk, his hands learning ranching the way they'd once learned freight routes and contracts. Mirabelle kept the newspaper running. She hired a second assistant. She printed stories about water conservation, land rights, territorial politics. She became a voice people listened to. At night, they collapsed into the ranch house bed, exhausted and satisfied, and talked about the future. Children, maybe. More land. A printing press big enough to expand the Gazette. The corporation never came back. Voss died in prison. The executives scattered to other territories, other schemes. Blue Prairie grew. New families moved in. The river fed the farms. The town thrived. And on summer evenings, Mirabelle and Mercer sat on the porch of High Wind Ranch and watched the prairie stretch gold and endless under the setting sun. You ever regret it? Mirabelle asked once. Giving up the freight work? The money? Mercer pulled her close. Not once. This is what I should have chosen from the start. She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. We chose each other. That's what matters. Years passed. The ranch prospered. The newspaper won awards. Their first child, a daughter, learned to ride before she could write. Their second, a son, inherited Mercer's steady eyes and Mirabelle's stubborn streak. Blue Prairie became known as the town that fought back, the town that won. And every year, on the anniversary of the hearing, Judge Holloway visited. He'd sit on the ranch porch, drink coffee, and tell the story to anyone who'd listen. About the dust storm, the line shack, the standoff, the ruling that saved a town. Mirabelle never tired of hearing it, because it reminded her that love wasn't just the easy moments. It was the choice you made when bullets were flying and the world was collapsing. It was trusting someone enough to fight beside them. It was forgiving the past and building a future worth keeping. And every time Mercer caught her eye during the judge's story, he smiled. That same smile he'd given her on their wedding day. The one that said, "I chose you. I choose you. I'll keep choosing you." She smiled back. Because she'd chosen him too. And that choice, that terrifying, beautiful, hard-won choice, had saved them both. 10 years after the hearing, the territorial governor visited Blue Prairie. He toured the town, met the citizens, and gave a speech in the square. He called Mirabel and Mercer to the front, presented them with a commendation for their service to justice and the territory. The crowd cheered. Their children watched, wide-eyed. That night, back at the ranch, Mirabel hung the commendation on the wall beside the original newspaper headline. Blue Prairie wins. Mercer came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "We did good, didn't we?" She leaned back into him. "We did. And we're not done yet." "No." He kissed the top of her head. "We're just getting started." Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the cottonwoods. The river ran strong and clear. The stars came out, brilliant and infinite. And inside the ranch house, the fire burned warm, and the future stretched bright. Mirabel stood in the Blue Prairie Gazette office on a winter morning 15 years after the hearing, reading a letter from the territorial capital. Clara, now the co-editor, looked over her shoulder. "What is it?" "A request." Mirabel smiled. "They want me to write a book about the water rights case, about fighting corruption on the frontier." "You should do it," Clara said. "It's a story people need to hear." "Maybe." Mirabel folded the letter. "But first, I have a newspaper to run, and a ranch to help manage, and children to raise. The book can wait." She walked home through the winter streets, past the church where she'd married Mercer, past the storefronts thriving because the river still flowed. At the ranch, Mercer was teaching their daughter to mend harness. Their son was mucking stalls, complaining loudly. Mirabel stood in the doorway and watched her family, this messy, beautiful, hard-won life, and felt gratitude settle deep in her bones. Mercer looked up, caught her eye, and grinned. That smile that still made her heart skip. She crossed to him, kissed him quick. "I love you. I love you too." He squeezed her hand. "Always have. Always will." Their daughter made a gagging noise. "Parents are gross." Mirabel laughed. "Someday you'll understand." But even as she said it, she hoped her daughter would never have to fight as hard as she had. That the future they were building would be kinder, safer, fairer. That night, after the children were asleep, Mirabel and Mercer sat by the fire. She pulled out a blank journal, the one she'd been saving. "Starting the book?" Mercer asked. "Starting our story," she corrected. "The real one. Not just the hearing. Everything. How we met. How you left. How we found each other again." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a hard story. The best ones are." She opened the journal, dipped her pen. "How should I start?" Mercer thought. Then he smiled. "Start with the truth. That love isn't about never failing. It's about choosing to come back. Choosing to fight. Choosing each other, even when it's hard." Mirabel wrote the words down. Then she kept writing. About Blue Prairie. About water and dust and danger. About betrayal and forgiveness. About a man who ran and a woman who stayed, and how they built something real from the wreckage. The years kept turning. The children grew. The ranch expanded. The newspaper thrived. Blue Prairie became a stop on the new rail line, the one the corporation had tried to steal the water for. Irony, Mercer called it. Justice, Mirabelle said. They grew older together. Gray crept into Mirabelle's auburn hair. Mercer's hands grew rough from ranch work, scarred from 1,000 tasks. But the love between them stayed strong, tested by drought and hard winters, by arguments over money and parenting, by the slow, grinding work of building a life. And every year, on the anniversary of the hearing, they rode out to the old line shack at Highwind. It was still there, weathered and stubborn. They'd sit on the step and remember. The storm, the standoff, the choice. "This is where we started," Mercer said once. "No." Mirabelle took his hand. "This is where we started over. Where we chose to fight instead of run." He kissed her knuckles, the gesture tender and familiar. "Best choice I ever made." "Me too." The sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in golds and reds. The wind whispered through the grass. The river ran strong, fed by snowmelt and rain and the stubborn refusal of a town to die. And two people who'd loved and lost and found each other again sat together in the fading light, their hands clasped, their hearts full. Because love, real love, wasn't the easy beginning. It was the choice you made every day after. The choice to stay, to fight, to build. And they'd chosen each other. Mirabelle Everly Cutter died at 83, surrounded by children and grandchildren, in the house at Highwind Ranch. Mercer followed 6 months later, his heart simply stopping one quiet morning as he sat on the porch, watching the sun rise. They were buried side by side in the Blue Prairie Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree, near the river they'd fought to save. The headstone was simple: Mirabelle and Mercer Cutter. They chose each other. They chose love. They chose to fight. The town they saved kept growing. The newspaper Mirabelle built still ran, now in its 4th generation of editors. And every year, on the anniversary of the hearing, the town gathered at the church. They read from Mirabelle's book. They told the story to the children about the dust storm, the line shack, the standoff, about a woman who refused to let her town die, about a man who found the courage to come back, about love that survived everything the frontier could throw at it. And every year, someone asked, "Is it a true story?" And every year, the answer was the same. Every word. Because some stories are too important to be anything but true. Stories about courage, about second chances, about choosing love when the world is burning. Stories like Mirabelle and Mercer's. Stories that remind us all that the hardest battles are worth fighting, and that love, real love, is the strongest thing we'll ever build. The prairie wind whispers through Blue Prairie still. The river runs strong. The town thrives. And somewhere, in the rustle of cottonwood leaves and the creak of old wood, you can still hear them. Mirabelle and Mercer, choosing each other, building something beautiful from dust and danger and devotion forever.